So what I created was a story that began at one end of the pipeline and ran through maybe 10 stops from one end of the block to the other. And the beginning, the opening was, guess what? There's a pipeline coming to Oregon. Officials that you elected have green-lighted this issue. And then you go to the next one. It's like a little station of posters that were low enough that they didn't dwarf the pipeline. So then the next station was, why are officials, bringing a pipeline, approving a pipeline for our state? So then you come to the next one, and it says it's for a 232-mile pipeline that will export fracked gas to Asia. And then you come to the next one and say, well, what else do the leaders condemn when they condemn our private properties? What else are they condemning by approving this pipeline? And then it moves on and it talks about the 400 waterways that will be crossed and 32 endangered species that will be threatened and the hundreds of acres of old growth forest, the public lands, and then it ends with the worker safety and then talks about the tsunami subduction zone that this terminal will be placed in or would be placed in. From there we moved to the story of climate change. So the story that was told then about 3/4 of the way through is the larger story of climate. The danger of having unburned methane gas leaking into the climate at a time when we're trying to cut greenhouse gas emissions. And this, in fact, is doing the opposite. This push now for natural gas seems like a good idea. That's what we're being sold, the idea that it's a bridge fuel, when in fact it's a gangplank. The reason it's a gangplank is because methane unburned in the atmosphere, of which there is a lot in this process, particularly the fracked gas process, which is different from traditional natural gas drilling. So you've got these new, more intensive technologies of fracking and superfracking that release untold amounts of unburned methane into the atmosphere, and those methane gases trap 86 times more heat in the atmosphere than carbon does. Now, methane lives for a shorter amount of time in the atmosphere, but it's much more intensive in its capacity to trap heat. The next part was, hey, guess what? Somebody can stop this pipeline. And that's Kate Brown, your new governor. At that time, she was brand new. She had literally come into office. I had to change some of my writing because Governor Kitzhaber resigned just as this was all being, put together. So we had to redo some signs, and Kate Brown became the new target. And the way she became the target for this particular installation was through a selfie station. So we had two ways that people could engage with Kate Brown at this installation. One was a selfie station that the college students on the block showed me how to do with hashtags. And so we had a whiteboard, several whiteboards, and people could hold them up with a message to Governor Brown: thank you for stopping the fracked gas for export pipeline in Oregon, hashtag, stop the pipeline in Oregon or something. So that was one way. So a lot of people took pictures of themselves with this whiteboard in front of the pipeline. The other way was that there was a station where people could draw their own postcards. And again, this is building on the pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline project that I had done the year before. So there was a place for children, a little children's corner, and some markers and blank postcards that were stamped. And so that anybody could draw a postcard, and then we had a mailbox, so they could actually mail it. So from the beginning to the end of this one block walk, you could find out what the threat was, find out who was responsible, find out what the impacts were, and then find out what the solution was for this particular threat. And in this case, it's to have the public rise up in opposition and to tell Governor Brown, there is no way you're allowed to greenlight this disastrous project for Oregonians. It's a betrayal of the people of Oregon. So that's the narrative. You're in charge, you get to choose. You're going to be on the side of Canadian gas companies using eminent domain against Oregonians, or you're going to stand with the people of Oregon. So that's the narrative that we're putting out. Another thing that's important about this is that it's very visceral. That pipeline was dramatic, and it was to scale. And the signs that said condemned across the house were really big. So each house, one after another, this repeated condemned sign had, from when you stood back, it was a big, dramatic, very visually powerful installation. And people could wander in and read and learn about the threat of it, but they could also just drive by and they got it. They got it. There's a pipeline coming, and there was a big, long banner that described enough of it that people understood what the threat was. So I like having multiple layers, multiple levels at which people can engage with something. But in the end, I want them to engage emotionally, not out of guilt, not out of fear, but out of the sense of possibility. Wow, look at what these other people are doing. I want in. This looks like fun. This looks exuberant. This is celebratory. This is invitational. And not only that, but it has a clear goal. You follow it to the end. There's the goal. Here's what you can do. Put pressure on the governor.